president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, has been assassinated. International leaders call for caution and the preservation of democratic order. A month after the second-round presidential elections, Peruvian authorities have yet to officially proclaim the president-elect. Meanwhile, supporters of the winner, leftist Pedro Castillo, are mobilizing to defend the result. Iran formally accused Israel on Tuesday of mounting a sabotage attack on a nuclear facility near Tehran last month. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south, and I'm Katrina Goss. The president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, has been assassinated. According to reports, Moise was killed in an attack on his home in the nation's capital, Port-au-Prince. According to the country's interim prime minister, Claude Joseph, the PM said that the president's residence was stormed by unidentified armed men at 1 a.m. local time. The First Lady has reportedly also been killed in the attack. Joseph said that all measures had been taken to guarantee the continuance of the state. Jovenel Moise, aged 53, had been in power since February 2017 after his predecessor, Michel Martelly, stepped down. It should be recalled that Haiti has seen months of unrest, with thousands taking to the streets to demand Moise leave office as his term ended in February. In the face of popular protests, the president had been trying to impose a constitutional referendum to legitimize his presidency. The news is making headlines worldwide, while analysts wonder what will happen next in the troubled Caribbean island. President Moise had ruled by decree for more than 2 years after the country failed to hold elections. The opposition and increasing numbers of the population demanded he step down in recent months as his term of office ended in February. The Prime Minister's office said the country's security situation is under the control of the National Police of Haiti and the Armed Forces of Haiti. However, a section of the police has launched an armed rebellion in recent months, while the capital has been largely overtaken by armed gangs. In the early morning hours of Wednesday, the streets were largely empty in Port-au-Prince. The Prime Minister added that some of the attackers spoke in Spanish, but offered no further explanation of the claims. And the reaction to Moise's assassination are already coming in. On his Twitter account, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said his government firmly condemns the crime. He expressed condolences for Moise's family and solidarity with the Haitian people. We call on all political forces to unite in finding a solution to the deep crisis the country's in, he said. From Mexico, Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard also expressed condolences to the Haitian people and reiterated his rejection of violence. Meanwhile, the possibilities of foreign intervention, as usual, are already clear. Colombian President Ivan Duque called on the Organization of American States to send an urgent mission to Haiti in order to protect what he called democratic order in the country. For Duque, the assassination was a barbarian act of cowardice against the entire Haitian people. In other news, the Peace Court of Colombia charged 10 members of the military and 1 civilian of forcibly disappearing 24 people and murdering at least 120 civilians. The victims were falsely presented as guerrilla fighters who'd been killed in combat, a scandal known as false positives. The Special Jurisdiction for Peace Tribunal accused the 11 defendants of playing a decisive role in the murders, which were presented as combat deaths in the Catatumbo region of Colombia's Norte de Santander province between January 2007 and August 2008 in order to inflate body counts. In a press conference hosted by Colombia's National Popular Assembly, set up to address the people's demands after several failed dialogue attempts with the government in the context of the national strike mobilizations, representative of the Alternativa Popular movement, Diego Vega, denounced the use of state terrorism against social mobilizations.
Proclaimed that this government's response to the massive organized protest has adopted a tyrannical nature, recurring to infiltration and confrontation against citizens by state agents and paramilitary groups, supported by regional mafia lords. This is a return to the practice of state terrorism that we historically experienced in our territory.
Representative for LGBTI rights Jaime Ricardo Muñoz also spoke at the People's Assembly press conference, calling on the people to stand up and fight against the neoliberal policies intensified under Ivan Duque's government.
Would be to reiterate this invitation to prepare ourselves at the local level, at the regional level of the sites of resistance all over the country, as we have been moving forward since Cali. I am a blue supporter. My voice as a representative for sexual diversity, as a student of a public university, I have joined the dynamic team of the National Popular Assembly here in Cali, and we extend again the invitation to schedule a pre-assembly with the characteristics of a local General Assembly or preparatory assembly.
On Tuesday, the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro demanded the United States government stop meddling in Venezuela's internal affairs after a comment on the upcoming regional elections was issued.
I tell the United States government and the governments of the world, do not meddle in the internal affairs of Venezuela, that we do not get into the electoral disaster that you were. Do not interfere in the internal electoral process that you don't know own this country. And Venezuela is not a colony of the United States government. Do not meddle here. Do not get involved in Venezuela. Venezuela has its institutions, has the best, most verifiable and auditable electoral system in the world. And we are going to elections and we will register all candidates who have to register.
Issues such as human rights violations and unilateral sanctions by political bullies demand an approach only instruments such as the United Nations Charter guarantee, members of the group of Friends in Defence of the UN Charter said Tuesday at a virtual conference. Established in March 2021 by Russia, China and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the group also includes countries like Algeria, Angola, Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba and Syria. The purpose is to highlight the United Nations founding principles such as the right to self-determination, non-intervention, no use of force or the threat of the use of force between states, the preservation of peace, people's basic rights and the like. Speakers noted that such issues were of particular relevance in view of the ongoing restructuring of power relations in the world. In the United States, where gun crime is rampant, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Tuesday issued an executive order declaring gun violence a disaster emergency. The governor hailed the order as the first step in a comprehensive plan to tackle the surge in gun violence throughout the state. He said the disaster emergency status will allow the state to address the crisis by expediting money and resources to communities. Cuomo's announcement comes as New York City and the country as a whole struggles to curb a rise in gun violence. The executive order comes after a particularly violent weekend in which 50 people were shot and wounded in the state, 26 of them in the Big Apple. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A month after the second-round presidential elections, Peruvian authorities have yet to officially proclaim the president-elect. Supporters of the winner, leftist Pedro Castillo, are mobilizing to defend the result. In the middle of the cold Lima winter, hundreds of Castillo's supporters who've travelled from distant parts of the country spend the night in some 180 tents in the Democracy Square in front of the National Jury of Elections headquarters. The jury continues to process the baseless claims of fraud submitted by the far-right losing candidate Keiko Fujimori before proclaiming the winner. As the process lags on, the National Front for Democracy and Governance of Peru, a network made up of trade unions, collectives, civil society associations and some political parties, called for a national strike on Tuesday to demand the proclamation of Pedro Castillo as president.
This for a month now, but we want to resist more until the jury's decision is recognized.
We are going to undertake something more radical because we will no longer allow our votes to be easily labeled as terrorists and then not proclaim President Pedro Castillo terrones. We feel discriminated against.
The Communist Party of China held Tuesday a summit with world political parties via video link on the occasion of its 100 years of existence. In his speech, President Xi Jinping stressed the need for a more equal distribution of wealth and cooperation among states. Over 160 countries are represented by diverse political parties in the video conference event, among them Russia, Cuba, Argentina, Vietnam and South Africa. Issues discussed included the COVID-19 pandemic, global challenges concerning peace and development, and the construction of societies based on rights, equality and environmental sustainability in opposition to destructive neoliberal policies. And Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, called for cooperation among political parties across the world to jointly cope with global risks and challenges.
The responsibility to strengthen cooperation and join hands to cope with global risks and challenges.
Faced with the rampant COVID-19 pandemic, we should adhere to scientific measures, advocate solidarity and cooperation, bridge the immunity gap, oppose politicizing the pandemic or leveling the virus, and jointly promote the building of a community of common health for mankind. Faced with the common enemies, such as terrorism, we should promote security and stability through cooperation and work together to forge a strong shield for security. Faced with the fragile ecological environment, we should respect nature, conform to nature, and protect nature, and jointly build a green homeland. We should live up to our responsibility, work shoulder to shoulder to find a solution for the harmonious coexistence between human and nature.
So at the summit, Cuban Communist leader and President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez highlighted China's role as an important force in maintaining world balance, stability and peace.
When the founding Congress of the Communist Party of China was held 100 years ago, it marked the beginning of a significant chapter in modern history. Among its delegates was Mao Zedong, whose contributions as party leader to the revolutionary struggle and national liberation of that country, which was then as poor as it was populated, will always be remembered with admiration.
Meanwhile, President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, congratulated his Chinese counterpart for his remarks during the inauguration of the World Political Parties Summit.
I would like to begin by congratulating President Xi Jinping for his wonderful speech, in which he highlighted the value of multilateralism, the value of environmental protection, the value of preserving world peace, and the value of solidarity. I believe that these are four essential points to think of a better world, and that is why I wanted to begin my speech by congratulating him.
In addition, former Bolivian president and indigenous leader Evo Morales took the floor as chairman of the ruling Movement for Socialism Party.
China's commitment with multilateralism, international law, and with the Organization of the United Nations is extremely important for facing the global challenges ahead. The COVID-19 pandemic shows how fragile life is, and that when we are connected, challenges like climate change and inequality can be solved.
China's largest oil refiner, Sinopec, unveiled a new mega-project combining carbon capture, utilization and storage in East China's Shandong province, which is expected to be operational by the end of this year. The China Petroleum and Chemical Corporation has set a goal to build the country's first million-ton class carbon capture system in compliance with the nation's drive to peak carbon emissions and achieve carbon neutrality. The project will serve to collect and reuse the carbon dioxide produced along with natural gas production. It consists of two sub-facilities, respectively, in Sinopec's Kilu Petrochemical Company and Shengli Oilfield. Carbon dioxide emissions are expected to be reduced by 1 million tonnes per year, equivalent to a green effort of planting 9 million trees or forbidding around 600,000 economy cars for 1 year. And we have more news coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Iran formally accused Israel on Tuesday of mounting a sabotage attack on a nuclear facility near Tehran last month. Cabinet spokesman Ali Rabe said the attack on a building in Karaj, a city about 40 kilometers northwest of the capital that belongs to the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, sought to thwart ongoing talks in Vienna aimed at salvaging the nuclear deal with world powers. The latest report follows several suspected incidents targeting Iran's nuclear program that have heightened regional tensions in recent months as diplomatic efforts continue in Vienna. The Zionist regime is opposed to any return to the agreement with Iran, which would mean the lifting of US sanctions against the country.
News of the attack is correct, but it has just caused a hole in the ceiling, and this act of sabotage hasn't damaged any important equipment, and it has failed to hit the equipment. It couldn't go beyond creating a hole in the ceiling. This is not the first time that the only country that would benefit from our talks being stopped tries to stop our efforts. We guess that these plans are made by that country.
A South African court heard former President Jacob Zuma's application to halt execution of an imminent arrest order this Tuesday. The Constitutional Court handed Zuma a 15-month jail term last week for failing to appear before a commission on corruption. Zuma was initially given until the end of Sunday to hand himself in, after which police would be obliged to arrest him. But police gave him several days' breathing space as he filed an appeal that the court agreed to hear. Zuma's lawyer argued that he was not a flight risk given his delicate health and that he was under the care and security of the state. A verdict is expected on Friday. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced by conflict in the north of Mozambique risk facing a hunger emergency without urgent donor funding, according to the UN. The United Nations World Food Programme said food assistance could be completely suspended unless it raises $121 million to assist a caseload of 730,000 people from September through December, as families are completely reliant on humanitarian support. Thousands have continued to flee insurgent violence in Mozambique's northern province of Cabo Delgado. In the midst of this situation, children are the most affected, with some 75,000 under 5 years of age suffering from acute malnutrition, a situation that's expected to spread to several regions of the country.
Shooting and attacking the village. At that moment, this baby was sleeping in the house. I went inside the house to take the baby and they came in. When I picked up the baby, they shoot. Hey, stop, we will kill you. Stop, we will kill you. I begged, I say no, please don't kill us. I was already carrying the baby. He was naked, no clothes, nothing at all.
This was a tourism area, fishing, good economy, people had a good way of life, but guess what? Insurgents, terrorists come in, rip families apart, burning their homes, killing people, raping women, just exploiting a good way of life. And so the World Food Program is now in here trying to bring hope to people. 715,000 people that we're now supporting.
Scientists in Kenya are on a quest to save the northern white rhinoceros, one of two subspecies of white rhino on the brink of extinction after the death of the last male in 2018. They are confident about saving the species using 9 embryos obtained from eggs harvested from 2 surviving females and frozen sperm from the deceased males. The next stage is to work out how to take those embryos and put them into a surrogate southern white rhino female. The scientists hope to have 1 or 2 northern white rhino calves in 2 to 3 years. They'll repeat the process multiple times to eventually have enough live rhinos to breed naturally amongst each other and gradually recover the population, which has dwindled mainly due to the effects of climate change and poaching. In Georgia, members of extremist groups were arrested on Tuesday after trying to break police lines and disrupt an LGBTQI rally in the capital. The demonstration in front of Parliament was called after violence prevented a pride march being held in a city a day earlier. Activists gathered in a show of solidarity. Organisers of Monday's March for Dignity cancelled the event, saying authorities had not provided adequate security guarantees. Homophobic opponents of the march blocked off the capital's main avenue, as denounced by journalists covering the protest, and threw sticks and bottles at reporters. In 2018, a constitutional amendment was passed in Georgia to define marriage as a union of 1 man and 1 woman. The following year, the annual Pride March had to be cancelled for security reasons. Spain's cabinet approved a draft bill strengthening the country's laws against rape by requiring explicit consent for sex, a move long demanded by assault survivors and women's rights groups. The bill is known as Only Yes Means Yes.
The most important thing is that it focuses on the woman's consent as the fundamental aspect of which crimes against sexual freedom are based. In this way, Spain complied with the Istanbul Convention on the maxim that only yes is yes, making it clear that silence or passivity does not mean consent, or that not showing opposition cannot be an excuse for acting against the will of the victim. Another very important part of the law concerns the distinction between sexual abuse and sexual assault. From now on, and also in line with international conventions, all sexual conduct without consent will be considered sexual assault. The crime of rape will therefore no longer only be reserved for cases involving violence or intimidation.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. Plus you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.